We're in chapter 4. I'm just gonna start reading. Instead of waiting for everybody, I'll just start reading. I'm gonna read the last paragraph of chapter 3 and then continue on with chapter 4 of A Wind in the Door. Meg undressed slowly, standing by her attic window, wondering if Dr. Louise's talk about snakes had been entirely casual chat over a cup of cocoa. Perhaps it was only the strange events of the evening which caused her to look for meanings under the surface of what might well be an important conversation. She turned out the lights and looked out the window. She could see across the vegetable garden to the orchard, but the trees still held enough leaves so that she could not see into the north pasture. Was there really a cherubim waiting at the star-watching rock, curled up into a great feathery ball, all those eyes closed in sleep? Was he real? What is real? No. So chapter 4 is Protagonist. Meg woke up before dawn, suddenly and completely, as though something had jerked her out of sleep. She listened. Kito, come here. Come here. Cat break. Come here. Come here. She listened only the usual noises of the sleeping house. She turned on the lights and looked at her clock. She had set the alarm for 6, as usual. It was now 5. Hello. I think he wants attention. She had another whole hour in which she could curl up under the covers, luxuriate in warmth and comfort, and doze. Then she remembered. One of him. 10. Okay. Then she remembered. She tried to reassure herself that she was remembering a dream, although it was not the way that a dream is remembered. It must have been a dream. Obviously, it must have been a dream. The only way to prove that it was nothing but a dream, without waking Charles Wallace and asking him, was to get dressed and go out to the star-watching rock and make sure that there was no cherubim there. And if by some slim chance it had not been a dream, she had promised the cherubim that she would come to him before breakfast. Had it not been for the horrible moments with Mr. Jenkins screeching across the sky, she would not have wanted it to be a dream. She desperately wanted Blageni to be real, to take care of everything. But the unreality of Mr. Jenkins, who had always been disagreeably predictable, was far more difficult for her to accept than the teacher, or even a cherubim who looked like a drive of dragons. She dressed hurriedly, putting on her kilt and a clean blouse. She tiptoed downstairs as quietly and carefully as she had the night before, through the kitchen and into the pantry, where she put on her heaviest jacket and a multicolored knitted tam o'shanter, one of her mother's rare successful ventures into domesticity. Yeah, it's a great one. Engineers. Oh, thank you. Thank you, love your fate. Yep, just in time. Yes, I just started. Yeah, this is keto. Same book, same book. It's a long book. Oh. Ah. Oh, okay. It is A Wind in the Door. I know it's backwards, but A Wind in the Door. It's the trilogy. It's the second book of the Wrinkle in Time trilogy. So it's A Wind in the Door. Of course. You're welcome. This time no wind blew, no doors slammed. She turned on the flashlight to guide her. It was a still, chill pre-dawn. The grass was white with spiderweb trackings of dew and light frost. A thin vapor moved delicately across the lawn. The mountains were curtained by ground fog, although in the sky she could see stars. She ran across the garden, looking warily about her. But there was no Mr. Jenkins. Of course there was no Mr. Jenkins. At the stone wall, she looked carefully for Louise, but there was no sign of the big snake. She crossed the orchard, climbed the wall again. Still no Louise. It was much too early and much too cold for snakes, anyhow, and ran across the north pasture, past the 2 glacial rocks, and to the star-watching rock. There was nothing there except the mist whirling gently in the faint breeze. So it had all been a dream. Then the mist seemed to solidify, to become moving wings. Hi, kitty. Hello, Cody. Oh, thank you, guys. Then the mist... Oh, you're real, she said loudly. You're not something I dreamed after all. Protagonist delicately stretched out one huge wing skyward, then folded it. I have been told that human beings seldom dream about cherubim. Thank you for being prompt. It is in the nature of cherubim to dislike tardiness. Meg sighed, in resignation, in fear, and surprisingly in relief. Okay, Progo, I guess you're not a figment of my imagination. What do we do now? I've got just about an hour before breakfast. Are you hungry? No, I'm much too excited to be hungry, but if I don't turn up on time, it won't go down very well if I explain that I was late because I was talking with a cherubim. My mother doesn't like tardiness either. Projanowski said, much can be accomplished in an hour. We have to find out what our first ordeal is. Don't you know? Why would I know? You're a cherubim. Even a cherubim has limits. When 3 ordeals are planned, then nobody knows ahead of time what they were even. The teacher may not know. Then what do we do? How do we find out? Projanowski's waved several wings slowly back and forth in thought, which would have felt very pleasant on a hot day, but which on a cold morning made Meg turn up the collar of her jacket. The cherubim did not notice. He continued waving and thinking. Then she could feel his words moving slowly, tentatively within her mind. If you've been assigned to me, I suppose you must be some kind of a namer, too, even if a primitive one. A what? A namer. For instance, the last time I was with a teacher, or at school, as you call it, my assignment was to memorize the names of the stars. Which stars? All of them. You mean all the stars in all the galaxies? Yes. If he calls for one of them, someone has to know which one he means. Anyhow, they like it. There aren't many who know them all by name, And if your name isn't known, then it's a very lonely feeling. Am I supposed to learn the names of all the stars too? It was an appalling thought. Good galaxy, no. Then what am I supposed to do? Protagonist waved several wings, which Meg was learning was more or less his way of expressing, I haven't the faintest idea. Well then, if I'm a namer, what does that mean? What does a namer do? The wings drew together, the eyes closed, singly and in groups until all were shut. Small puffs of mist-like smoke rose, swirled about him. When I was memorizing the names of the stars, part of the purpose was to help them each to be more particularly the particular star each one was supposed to be. That's basically a namer's job. Maybe you're supposed to make Earthlings feel more human. What's that supposed to mean? She sat down on the rock beside him. She was somehow no longer afraid of his wildness, his size, his spurts of fire. He asked, "How do I make you feel?" She hesitated, not wanting to be rude, forgetting that the cherubim, far more than Charles Wallace, did not need her outward words to know what was being said within. But she answered truthfully, confused. Several puffs of smoke went up. Well, we don't know each other very well yet. Who makes you feel least confused? Calvin. There was no hesitation here. When I'm with Calvin, I don't mind being me. You mean he makes you more you, don't you? I guess you could put it that way. Who makes you feel the least you? Mr. Jenkins. Protagonist probed sharply. Why are you suddenly upset and frightened? He's the principal of the grade school in the village this year, but he was in my school last year, and I was always getting sent to his office. He never understands anything, and everything I do is automatically wrong. Charles Wallace would probably be better off if he weren't my brother. That's enough to finish him with Mr. Jenkins. Is that all? What do you mean? When you say Mr. Jenkins, I feel such a cold wave of terror wash over you that I feel chilly myself. Progo, something happened last night, before we met you and Blagini, when I was all alone in the garden. Her voice trembled. Progo, something happened last night, before we met you and Blagini, when I was all alone in the garden. Her voice trailed off. What happened, Earthling? Tell me. I have a feeling this may be important. Why should it be difficult to tell Protagonist? The cherubim himself was just as unbelievable, but the cherubim was himself, was Protagonist, while Mr. Jenkins had not been Mr. Jenkins. As she tried to explain to Protagonist, she could sense him pulling away, and suddenly he flung all his wings about himself in a frantic reflex of self-preservation. Then two eyes looked out at her under one wing. Ekthroi. It was an ugly word. As Protagonist uttered it, the morning seemed colder. What did you say? Meg asked. You're Mr. Jenkins, the real one. Could he do anything like the one you just told me about? Could he fly into a nothingness in the sky? This is not a thing that human beings can do, is it? No. You say he was like a dark bird, but a bird that was nothingness, and that he tore the sky. Well, that's how I remember it. It was all quick and unexpected, and I was terrified, and I couldn't really believe it had happened. It sounds like the Ekthroi. He covered his eyes again. The what? Slowly, as though with a great effort, he uncovered several eyes. The Ekthroi. Oh, Earthling, if you do not know Ekthroi, I don't want to, not if they're like what I saw last night. Protagonist agitated his wings. I think we must go to see this Mr. Jenkins, the one you say is at your little brother's school. Why? Protagonist withdrew into all his wings again. Meg could feel him thinking grumpily. They told me it was going to be difficult. Why couldn't they have sent me off someplace quiet to recite the stars again? Or I'm even willing to memorize Farandole. I've never been to Earth before. I'm too young. I'm scared of the shadowed planets. What kind of star has this planet got anyhow? Then he emerged, slowly, one pair of eyes at a time. Megling, I think you have seen an Ektheros. If we are dealing with Ektheroi, then I just know with every feather on my wings, and you might try counting my feathers sometime, that we have to go see this Mr. Jenkins. It must be part of the trial. Mr. Jenkins? Part of our first test? But it doesn't make sense. It does to me. Progo, she objected. It's impossible. I can slip off my school bus and then walk to the grade school the day I did when I went to talk to Mr. Jenkins about Charles Wallace. And a fat lot of good that did. If you have seen an Ektheros, everything is different, Protagonist said. Okay, I can get to the grade school all right, but I can't possibly take you with me. You're so big you wouldn't even fit into the school bus. Anyhow, you would terrify everybody. At the thought, she smiled, but Projanowski's was not in a laughing mood. Not everybody is able to see me, he told her. I'm real, and most Earthlings can bear very little reality. But if it will relieve your mind, I'll dematerialize. He waved a few wings gracefully. It's really more comfortable for me to not be burdened with matter, but I thought it would be easier for you if you could converse with someone you could see. The cherubim was there in front of her, covering most of the star-watching rock, and then he was not there. She thought she saw a faint shimmer in the air, but it might have been the approach of dawn. She could feel him, however, moving within her mind. Are you feeling extremely brave, Megling? No. A faint light defined the eastern horizon. The stars were dim, almost extinguished. I think we're going to have to be brave, Earthchild, but it will be easier because we're together. I wonder if the teacher knows. Knows what? That you've seen an Ektheros. Progo, I don't understand. What is an Ektheros? Abruptly, Projanowski's materialized, raised several wings, and gathered her in. Come, littling. I'll take you someplace yesterday and show you. How can you take me yesterday? I can't possibly take you today, silly. It's time for you to go into breakfast, and your mother dislikes tardiness. And who knows what we may have to do, or where we may go to, before tomorrow. Come. He drew her further into him. She found herself looking directly into one of his eyes, a great amber cat's eye. The dark mandala of the pupil opening, compelling, beckoning. She was drawn toward the oval, was pulled into it, and was through it, into the ultimate night on the other side. Then she felt a great, flaming wind, and knew that somehow she herself was part of that wind. Then she felt a great shove, and she was standing on a bare stone mountaintop, and Projanowski's was blinking and winking at her. She thought she saw the oval mandala eye through which she had come, but she was not sure. The cherubim raised a great wing to sketch the slow curve of sky above them. The warm rose and lavender of sunset faded, dimmed, and was extinguished. The sky was drenched with green at the horizon, muting upward into a deep purpley blue, through which stars began to appear in totally unfamiliar constellations. Meg asked, "Where are we?" "Never mind where. Watch." She stood beside him, looking at the brilliance of the stars. Then came a sound which was above sound, beyond sound, a violent, silent electrical report, which made her press her hands in pain against her ears. Across the sky, where the stars were clustered as thickly as in the Milky Way, a crack shivered, slivered, became a line of nothingness. If this kind of thing was happening in the universe, no matter how far away from Earth and the Milky Way, Meg did not wonder that her father had been summoned to Washington and Brookhaven. Progo, what is it? What happened? The ecthroi have exed. What? Annihilated, negated, extinguished, exed. Meg stared in horrible fascination at the rent in the sky. This was the most terrible thing she had ever seen, more horrifying than the Mr. Jenkins' ekthros the night before. She pressed close to the cherubim, surrounding herself with wings and eyes and puffs of smoke, but she could still see the rip in the sky. She could not bear it. She closed her eyes to shut it out. She tried to think of the most comfortable thing possible, the safest, most reasonable, ordinary thing. What then? The dinner table at home, winter. The red curtains drawn across the window, and a quiet snow falling softly outdoors. An applewood fire in the fireplace, and Fortinbras snoring happily on the hearth. A tape playing Holt's The Planets. No, maybe that wasn't too comforting in her mind's ear. She shifted to a ghastly recording of the school band with Sandy and Dennis playing somewhere in the cacophony. Dinner was over, and she was clearing the table and starting the dishes, and only half listening to the conversations of her parents, who were lingering over their coffee. It was almost as tangible as though she were actually there, and she thought she felt Projanowski's pushing at her mind, helping her remember. But she really listened that attentively. Had she really listened that attentively to her parents while she stood running hot water over the plates? Their voices were as clear as though she were actually in the room. Her father must have mentioned the terrible thing which Projanowski's had just shown her. The terrible thing which was terrible precisely because it was not a thing, because it was nothing. She could hear, too clearly, her father's voice, calm and rational, speaking to her mother. It isn't just in distant galaxies that strange, unreasonable things are happening. Unreason has crept up on us so insidiously that we've hardly been aware of it. But think of the things going on in our own country which you wouldn't have believed possible only a few years ago. Mrs. Murry swirled the dregs of her coffee. I don't think I believe all of them now, although I know they're happening. She looked up to see that the twins and Charles Wallace were out of the room, that Meg was splashing water in the sink as she scoured a pot. 10 years ago, we didn't even have a key to this house. Now we lock up when we go out. The irrational violence is even worse in the cities. Mr. Murry absent-mindedly began working out an equation on the tablecloth. For once, Mrs. Murry did not even seem to notice. He said, "They've never known a time when people drank rainwater because it was pure, or could eat snow, or swim in a river or brook. The last time I drove home from Washington, the traffic was so bad, I could have made better time with a horse. There were huge signs proclaiming speed limit 65 miles per hour, and we were crawling along at 20. And the children and I kept dinner hot for you for 3 hours, and finally ate, pretending we weren't worried that she might have been in an accident." Mrs. Murry said bitterly, "Here we are, at the height of civilization, in a well-run state, in a great democracy, and 4 10-year-olds were picked up last week for pushing hard drugs in the school where our 6-year-old is regularly given black eyes and a bloody nose." She suddenly noticed the equation growing on the tablecloth. "What are you doing?" "I have a hunch that there's some connection between your discoveries about the effects of farandole on mitochondria and that unexplained phenomenon out in space." His pencil added a fraction, some Greek characters, and squared them. Mrs. Murry said in a low voice, "My discoveries are not very pleasant." "I know. I isolated farandole because something beyond increasing air pollution has to account for the accelerating numbers of deaths from respiratory failure, and this so-called flu epidemic. It was the sonarscope which gave me the first clue." She stopped abruptly, looked at her husband. "It's the same sound, isn't it? The strange cry of the alien mitochondria, and the cry picked up in those distant galaxies by the new paraboloidoscope. There's a horrid similarity between them. I don't like it. I don't like the fact that we don't even see what's going on in our own backyard. LA is trying as honorably as a president can try in a world which has become so blunted by dishonor and violence that people casually take it for granted. We have to see a great dramatic fissure in the sky before we begin to take danger seriously. And I have to be deathly worried about our youngest child before I regard farandole, except in a cool academic manner." Meg had turned from the kitchen sink at the pain in her mother's voice, and had seen her father reach across the table for her mother's hand. "My dear, this is not like you. With my intellect I see cause for nothing but pessimism and even despair. But I can't settle for what my intellect tells me. That's not all of it." "What else is there?" Mrs. Murray's voice was low and anguished. "There are still stars which move in ordered and beautiful rhythm. There are still people in this world who keep promises, even little ones, like your cooking stew over your Bunsen burner. You may be in the middle of an experiment, but you still remember to feed your family. That's enough to keep my heart optimistic, no matter how pessimistic my mind. And you and I have good enough minds to know how very limited and finite they really are. The naked intellect is an extraordinarily inaccurate instrument." How is everybody? Aw, I would love some cocoa. I am reading chapter 4 of the second book, A Wind on the Door, of the Wrinkle in Time trilogy. Protagonist said, "He's a wise man, your father." "Could you hear me remembering?" "I was remembering with you. Most of that conversation you didn't hear with your conscious mind, you know." "I have a very good memory," Meg started. Then she stopped herself. "Okay, I know I couldn't have remembered all that by myself. I suppose I just sort of took in the sound waves, didn't I? But how did you get it all from me?" Protagonist looked at her with two rigid owl-like eyes. "You are beginning to learn how to kite." "To what?" "Kite. It's how cherubim talk. It's talking without words. Just the same way that I can be myself and nor be infleshed. But I have to be infleshed, and I need words." "I know, Meg," he replied gently, "and I will keep things worded for you. But it will help if you will remember that cherubim kite without words among each other. For a human creature, you show a distinct talent for kiting." She blushed slightly at the compliment. She had a feeling that paying compliments is a habit not often indulged in by cherubim. "Progo, I wish I'd been able to see the equation Father was doodling on the tablecloth. If I'd seen it, then it might be somewhere in my mind for you to pull out." "Think," Protagonist said. "I'll help." Mother put the tablecloth in the wash. "But you remember there was some Greek letters." "Yes. Let me try to find them with you." She closed her eyes. "Relax now. Maybe this is the way for us to kite. Don't you try to think, just let me move about." Out of the corner of her mind's eye, she seemed to see 3 Greek characters among the numbers in the loosely strung equation her father was scribbling on the cloth. She thought them in prognoskes. Epsilon, Chi, and Theta. That's Ecth, the cherubim told her. Ecthroi. But how could Father... Think of the conversation we just recalled, Meg. Your parents are very aware of the evil in the world. All right. Yes, I know. Okay. Meg sounded cross. Until Charles started school, I hoped maybe we could ignore it. Like ostriches or something. Oh my gosh, thank you, RS. Thank you. The cherubim withdrew its wings from her entirely, leaving her exposed and cold in the strange hilltop. Open your eyes and look where the sky is torn. I'd rather not. Go on. I've got all my eyes open, and you only have to open 2. Meg opened her eyes. The rent in the sky was still there. She wondered what this distant phenomenon could have to do with Charles Wallace's pallor, with mitochondria, or whatever it was. How did the Ecthroi do that? Like Charles Wallace, he picked up a particular anxiety. It has to do with the unnaming. If we are namers, the Ecthroi are unnamers. Non-namers. Progo, what does that have to do with Mr. Jenkins? She felt a wave of apprehension roll through her. Little Ling, I think that is what we must find out. I think that is part of our first ordeal. Let us go. He drew her back into himself again. Again she was confronted with the single eye. She pulled through the opening oval pupil. Then the pupil snapped shut, and they were together on the star-watching rock, with dawn slowly lighting the east. Progo spread his wings wide, and she moved out. What do we do now? He said. The cherubim was asking her. I am only a human being, not quite full grown up, she replied. How would I know? Megleen, I've never been on your planet before. This is your home. Charles Wallace is your brother. You are the one who knows Mr. Jenkins. You must tell me what we are to do now. Meg stamped loudly and angrily against the hard, cold surface of the rock. This is too much responsibility. I'm still only a child. I didn't ask for any of this. Are you refusing to take the test? Protagonist pulled away from her. But I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for Blageni or you or any of it. Didn't you? I thought you were worried about Charles Wallace. I am. I'm worried about everything. Meg, Protagonist was somber and stern. Are you going to enter into the ordeal? I must know now. Meg stamped again. Of course I'm going. You know I have to. Charles Wallace is in danger. I'll do anything to help him, even if it seems silly. Then what do we do now? She shoved at her glasses as though that would help her think. I'd better go home now and have breakfast. Then I'll get on my school bus. It stops at the bottom of the hill, and maybe you'd better wait for me there. Fortinbras might bark at you. I'm sure he'd know you were in the house, even if you dematerialize, or whatever you call it. Whatever you think best, Projanowski said meekly. I'll be down at the foot of the road at 7 o'clock. The high school bus covers so much distance and makes so many stops. It takes an hour and a half, and I get on at one of the first stops. She felt a response from the cherubim, and then he disappeared. She could not see even a shimmer or feel a flicker of him in her mind. She headed back to the house. She kept the flashlight on, not for the known turnings of the path, but for the whatever new, unknown surprises might be waiting for her. When Meg got to the stone wall, Louise Larger was there, waiting, neither greeting nor attacking, waiting. Meg approached her cautiously. Louise watched her through eyes which shone in the flashlight like the water of a very deep well. May I go by, please, Louise? Meg asked timidly. Louise uncoiled, waving slightly in greeting, still looking intently at Meg. Then she bowed her head. and slithered off into the rocks. Meg felt that Louise had been waiting for her to give her a warning for whatever lay ahead, and to wish her well. It was strangely comforting to know that Louise's well-being was going with her. Well-wishing was going with her. There was sausage as well as hot porridge for breakfast. Meg felt that she ought to eat heartily, because who knew what lay ahead? But she could manage only a few mouthfuls. "Are you all right, Meg?" her mother asked. "Fine, thanks. You look a little pale. Sure you aren't coming down with something?" "She's worried about all of us with this mitochondria stuff. Just the normal throes of adolescence," she smiled at her mother. Sandy said, "If you don't want the sausage, I'll eat it." Dennis said, "Half for me, okay?" Charles Wallace slowly and deliberately ate a full bowl of porridge, but gave the twins the sausage. "Well then," Meg washed her dishes and put them in the rack. "I'm off." "Wait for us," Sandy said. She did not want to wait for the twins, to listen to their chatter on the walk down to the bus. On the other hand, it would keep her from thinking about what lay ahead. She had thought of Mr. Jenkins for as far back as she could remember with distaste, annoyance, and occasionally outrage, but never before with fear. When she left the house, she had a horrid, premonitory feeling that it would be a long time before she returned. Again, she wished that Fortinbras were walking to the bus with them, as he often did, and then returning to make the walk again with Charles Wallace. But this morning he showed no inclination to leave warmth of the kitchen. "What do you suppose will happen today?" Sandy asked as they started down the hill in the chill of early morning. Dennis shrugged. "Nothing, as usual. Racing to the foot of the hill." And that's the end of that chapter. Just on time. I didn't message anybody this time. I just went straight to reading. Hello, everybody. Hello. Alright, I am super, but I wanted to read a chapter. Hi, Keto. Howdy, Keto. Alright. Aw, NJ, thank you so much. He is saying hi. He's saying, "Can we cuddle now? I'm tired." Come on, baby. Come on. Come on. Keto, come on. Keto. There we go. Say hi. Oh, you guys get a cat butt. Halfway down. Halfway down. There we go. Oh no! Sorry, RS, thank you so much. Oh, thank you, you're so sweet. Thank you so much. For Ringo. Alright. Me and Keto are gonna get to bed. Yeah, Keto, he is. Come here. Come here. He is definitely territorial. Lay down. Lay down. All the way. All the way. Here's a good boy. Here's a good boy. Sleep well, puppy. Thank you, night. Sweet dreams, you guys. Sweet dreams.